Good morning,
Good morning.
good evening, good afternoon, and if I don't see you, good night. You want me to
No
put
more.
some?
Love that movie. It's one of the
Yeah.
one of the true classics.
Oh, fantastic movie. Yeah.
Uh,
Bit of, you could kind of use some, Buddhist symbolism
yeah.
in there. There's all kinds of symbolism in that film.
Oh yeah, there's definitely
But
religious
there's kind of
themes in
Buddhist
there.
applications for the Truman Show. There's
Oh,
definitely
for sure,
more.
for
It's
sure.
more Gnostic. It's more of a Gnostic thing, I think. But it,
Yeah, yeah,
all
there's
kinds of esotericism and all sorts of things. But you
a great
could,
movie.
there is some, you could kind of bring some
Yeah.
Buddhism, yeah, in there.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, there's people I was interested and I looked up. There's definitely some Christian religious themes in there.
Oh, all
There's
sorts. Yeah.
you could say there's Buddhist themes. I mean, I would say
There's
there
Freemason.
are religious
There's
parallels.
all kinds of Freemasonry,
Yeah.
fraternity kind of little, you know
Yeah.
what I mean, little winks in there, So
Yeah. Great movie. I love
it
it.
is great. It's fantastic on so many levels. It's just such a
Yeah.
that's a movie that it works on all the levels that it is trying to work on. Just comedy,
For
just good
sure.
movie, story, symbolism, all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's just
And Jim Carrey's acting is just
yeah,
uh
yeah,
that's one of
fantastic.
his best roles.
I think I agree. I agree. So,
Uh,
although I did like Liar Liar. I'm one of the few
okay.
I think that
I
that
haven't seen that one. So.
anyway. Right. So why are we here today?
Why are we here today, as
Why are we
usual? You know
here?
what? Let me let,
Justify your
let me
existence in 25 words or less.
yeah,
Yeah.
let me
All
turn
right.
off my fan here. It's a bit loud. Okay. So what I was thinking is
Do
um
do we want to do? Yeah. What are you most prepared for? Do you want to
yeah.
do more the just wrap up evil and then go into the next part of that
Oh,
series,
we've
or do you
we were
want to?
already yeah, we wrapped up that topic last
Yeah.
time.
Okay. All
Um
right.
so if there's any um like thought that you have on the conversation since last time, we can certainly talk about that.
Hmm.
But then you brought up, the principles of humanity and how
Yeah.
we
So
should live.
that's
So
yeah.
I thought that would be a good topic for today, and I did do a little preparation.
Cool.
And I think we mentioned doing some chanting as well. However, I have to be honest, I'm a bit tired this
Okay.
weekend,
No
so
worries. No
maybe
worries. Yeah.
maybe we should save the
Let's
chanting for.
yeah, we won't do the liturgical listening today.
Yeah.
We'll just
Okay.
episode. We'll just do the Bombu
Sure.
life. I think that's what I'm going to call the series, Bombu
The
life.
Bombu life. I
Like, and
like
how
it. I love it.
kind of the idea of how do we live, as
Yeah.
Jodo followers,
Not not a Bombu's life, like a bug's
a
life.
Bombu's life. Yeah, something like that. That was kind of the idea. That's kind of a Bombu's life. Yeah, that was kind of the I was what I was getting at with that.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I love it.
exactly. So yeah,
Very good.
so
Yeah. So, well, maybe
so
you should start. Like,
well, we
what
kind
did
of
you? What are your
yeah, we
thoughts
kind
on
of
the evil thing, and then
yeah.
leading
So
into?
well, the thoughts that we to kind of cover this series, this topic, we had to start with evil. So the quote unquote problem of evil in Buddhism, or problem of ignorance, I guess, frame it, but the problem of evil, and
Mm.
then the next bit was, kind of more about, you know, um, who is evil, who is evil,
Who
and
is
then
evil? Yeah.
yeah, and then kind of what do we do now with evil? Like what are
Mm.
some that was the next one. So I think we kind of, but we had to cover that to put the context
Yeah.
for the rest of this kind of series to talk about morality and or
Yeah.
principles of humanity and precepts and why there's no precepts, and do you know what I mean, and that sort
Right.
of thing. Why instead we and how
Yeah.
how do we how do we not take, the saying of we don't take the poison just because we have the antidote. So how do we not take, how do we not take the poison, and how do we, what do we do with, all the other tons of other Buddhist teachings about moral, right living, right acting, right, right livelihood, all those kinds of things. What do we do about when we're thinking about social and political kind of principles? We look at the 10 principles of kingship that the Buddha taught. Or, what do we put all that? How can we incorporate all that into our lives as Bombu in Mapo, as ordinary foolish spiritual idiots? So there you go. Principles humanity. Let's go.
Okay,
Over you, Kyokan.
That's the theme, I think. And we did look at, right, who, like you mentioned, who is the evil person in Tanisho and Shinran, right? And that is the evil in the religious sense is the person who realizes themselves to be, has that awakening to oneself as a person of, evil in that sense. So this is not a finger pointing game, where we identify the evil people in the room, This is
exactly, it's
all the finger is pointing to me.
Yeah, exactly.
It's about me
exactly
awakening to Amita's light of compassion, which shines on, my entire existence, top to bottom, everything that I am as an unenlightened individual, right? And so very, very important. This can be turned into, I was thinking about something Rennyo said about how the scriptures of our tradition, the sacred texts, in the hands of a person who doesn't have shinjin, is like a sharp sword in the hands of a small child. Because these texts can actually be abused and misused.
Yes.
To hurt people, to cause chaos and misguided views, just based on the words. You can use those even though it's the same words, they can be misused, right? And this goes for the entire, and that's actually when the slander, we often talk about slander of the Dharma, in the fifth, one of the five grave, evil karma in Mahayana Buddhism and Buddhism generally. But that term slander actually means abuse or misuse. So one of the definitions there is someone who preaches the Dharma for personal gain or for money or something like that, is abusing or misusing the Dharma. So that's an interesting nuance. Oftentimes things are lost in translation. Like we hear something, a phrase becomes a set phrase, like slander of the Dharma. And it just gets repeated and repeated until all other meaning is kind of lost. And so just that one possible English translation, when there may be many different nuances and meanings, becomes the meaning.
The one
in English.
Yeah.
The one and only meaning.
I think we've seen that. I think we've seen that many times. Many times. Well, it's throughout the history of Jodo Shinshu here, and at different points that people have abused. Obviously that's why we there's all the things in Tanisho, showing all the divergencies and how different ways that the Dharma is being abused. So and then right through and off and on, and then through to the present, we have plenty of sect of Jodo Shinshu, I guess you'd say, or or sects calling themselves Jodo Shinshu or claiming to be Jodo Shinshu, and having all kinds of literal fundamentalist kind of orthodox, claiming to be orthodox, quote unquote, claiming to be orthodox, and yet they're not really espousing the authentic teaching. Anyway, because of those, the literal interpretation of things in one way, in one nuance, anyway.
Yeah, same thing happens with Shinjin, right? Shinjin becomes a word. The original intention was not to translate Shinjin, because as we've seen from our discussions, there's such a broad range of meaning. So much is packed into that one word. I mean, there's so much significance there. And it means there's a huge horizon of meaning. And the translators of the collected works of Shinran thought, okay, so if we translate this as faith, people are going to immediately jump to the conclusion that it's something like the Christian idea of faith. And so to avoid that misunderstanding, let's just use the Japanese, and then hopefully it'll acquire meaning. And that's obviously the only way to go about it, honestly speaking. But what happened
I was gonna raise that. I was just thinking when you brought that up. I was thinking of that. I like that. That's what the editors and people involved with the scholarship involved with the collected works decided. The depth and breadth of the meaning of this word, it can't be. Let's just not try to define it. Let's just leave it as
right.
Shinjin.
Yeah, because faith, at least in English, implies an object and a subject. The subject of faith, the one who does the hard work of believing, and then the object, which is completely, the object of that devotion, kind of. And that doesn't capture, obviously, with what we've been calling the reverse polarity of Shinjin and Hongon Tariki Eiko no Shinjin. So the Shinjin that is bestowed through the directing of virtue of Amida's vow, that's entirely lost if you just translate it as faith. So the translators made a great decision. But what has happened, unfortunately, is that the term Shinjin has itself become reified and just become a word that is, not, that is actually no longer communicating
all of that.
So this is why, discussion like we do here, and also teaching, listening to teachers who are reliable and so on, is important, because as we're constantly being reminded, don't rely on the words, rely on the meaning. That's one of the 4 reliances, that Shakyamuni gave to his followers in the Nirvana Sutra. Don't rely on the meaning, not on the words. So, very important.
Look at the moon, not the finger.
Yeah.
And actually, don't even look at the moon. Just look at the moon. Look at where the finger's pointing. Instead of looking at the finger.
Yeah. So there's that thought that I had. It does occur to me that people with no understanding of how authentic textual interpretation occurs in a religious tradition kind of come barging into the great repository of sacred texts of Buddhism and just start grabbing things from here and there, whatever fits their personal opinions or proclivities or political ideas, whatever it is.
Cultural biases, cultural,
yeah,
traditions or beliefs.
So you end up with, you know, toddlers wielding sharp swords and cutting themselves and cutting other people around them. You know, there's a double-sided spiritual damage that goes on here, and it is unfortunate. It's not obviously it's not specific to Jodo Shinshu. It's a problem all religions have, right? I mean, you have Islam, you know, has beautiful spiritual texts, but it also has fundamentalists who twist and use those other texts as a sledgehammer. Christianity, of course, is exactly the same.
Yeah, I was going to say the Judeo-Christian tradition certainly has things, the Old Testament or the old scriptures that that can be that are selectively taken
applied
and applied, and used for all sorts of things, horrible and things. But anyway.
But then you have, obviously great enlightened, on at least some provisional level, spiritual teachers in every religion, right? Who do seem to have a real appreciation of and ability to interpret their traditions texts in a way that brings benefit to people, and that doesn't lead to more division, more misunderstanding, more karmic, how to put it, more saha madness.
Saha issues and
so saying all that, how should we in Jodo Shinshu talk about how to live, and having realized that our karmic evil is not an obstacle to Amita's light, Amita's salvation. Where does that leave us, right? I think this is your question. Is that
yes?
Is that right? Is that accurate?
Basically, yeah. That's one angle of many at this. I think there's a lot of ways you can come at this, but that's kind of one of the gists of what I want to talk about. Yeah, definitely.
Right. And so, of course, we have, and I think we have mentioned before, the passage where Shinran, in one of his letters, talks about just because you have the antidote, don't take a liking to the poison, right? And Shinran, of course, always urged and encouraged his followers not to do evil actions, of body, speech, and mind. And so there's no real, there's no ambivalence. There's no, ambivalence in Shinran's position, really. Now, of course, he also said
we also had Honen in our tradition, in the Jodo Shinshu tradition, first gave, kind of set up some boundaries for their.
That was because some Nimbutsu followers were kind of going wild in the capital, so to speak, and you had a concern.
Jodo's gone wild. Anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And there was concern because people were starting to say, "Oh, those Nimbutsu followers, did you hear what one of them did last night?" And it became an occasion for bad mouthing of the Nimbutsu movement, and that's what led Shonen to, kind of draw up a list of things to, and it's a historical document. That's actually included in, see if I can grab this really quick. There's a kind of a fuller edition of the Jodo Shinshu scriptures. It's actually 6 of these rather large-sized volumes. So this is just one of 6 volumes. And this is the kind of like miscellaneous the miscellaneous related works. And so in this book is some like Honen's, there's the initial.
Which book?
Go ahead.
What's the name of that volume?
This is called the Jodo Shinshu Seitin Zinsho.
Okay.
And
thank you. It's quite a beautiful book.
It lovely. Is. It's lovely, very well printed. It's a lovely, lovely book.
Something we can get into maybe for liturgical listening.
Yeah. I would love to have a conversation about scriptural editions.
Scriptural. Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
So in this book is those original, rules of behavior, so to speak, of the original of the Shinshu community, and it is of historical interest. Although some of the rules are not really applicable. So one of them is the men and the women should sit separately and not sit together. And you can imagine why a rule like that would be made at that, at that time. But that's not really a rule that is applicable. Like, we don't
today.
Need to.
Yeah.
No, it's not relevant to our society and our life, right? But that is a rule.
But I would like to bring in the things that would be. I would of the things that Honen, these kinds of boundaries that Honen set, I would like to bring in those as well to this discussion at some point. But,
right, I agree. And some of them were like, don't get intoxicated and similar things along those lines, which is, of course, good advice and a good rule to follow. But in terms of Jodo Shinshu, of course, we're coming much later, right? And we're at a point where, so for example, Rennyo Shonin says, let me see if I can bring up the letter. And I think this is what we were referring to with regard to, because he mentions the principles of humanity. And he actually mentions it quite a few times in his letters, but here's one example. In Fascically 2, letter 6 of Gobunsho, he says, he concludes the letter by saying, next, do not slight the provincial military governors and local land stewards claiming that you have attained faith. Meet your public obligations in full without fail. Further, do not belittle the various kami and Buddhas and bodhisattvas, for they are all encompassed within the 6 characters Namo Amida Butsu. Besides this, in particular, take the laws of the state as your outer aspect. Store other power faith deep in your hearts, and take the principles of humanity and justice as essential. Bear in mind that these are the rules of conduct that have been established within our tradition. So that's a pretty clear statement. And what is meant by, it's translated here as laws of the state. So this was, in Japanese, it's obo, which means king's law. So, the law of the ruler, so basically the law of the state, right, in modern parlance. And then, but what's interesting is Rennyo says, follow that as your outer aspect, but store the faith of the Buddha Dharma in your heart, So the most important thing is the Buddha Dharma. And then we also should, fulfill our public obligations, right? So I would say, like, if we live in a democratic society, country, this would include voting, or civic participation.
Exactly. Yeah.
But of course we could discuss that as well. But
exactly.
From my point of view,
which fascicle was that again? Sorry.
it's the second, and it's letter 6. So 2-6, Gobunsho 2-6.
I just want to bring it up because there's some things in there I want to kind of draw out, and I just want to go.
And there may be another letter as well, because there are a bunch that mention the principles of humanity.
I brought up this very topic once in a Dharma meeting.
Okay.
And referenced this. And referenced this very letter, and I read it aloud, and it was I think mixed. There were mixed reviews. Let's say there were mixed. What's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, just. And then it got countered with, well, there's things in the Buddhist teaching that you must raise arms and defend, yada yada. But anyway, to me, yeah, or something like that. You're supposed to defend, allegedly that there's somewhere in the Buddhist teachings or some Buddhist, text that or Buddhist the Buddha taught that you're supposed to defend Dharma, defend and Dharma followers and such. But anyway, this to me does seem like a very, what was it? Did you say it was fascicle? It was letter 6, yeah?
Fascicle 2, letter 6.
Letter 6, yeah. And this, this seems like a I'm just still trying to find a copy of the online here. This just does seem like, here we go. I think I found it. It seems to me this is a very, you should be assimilating, as much as possible with the society, within the governance, the society, the culture, the mores of where you live.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And not trying to be, not, and not, to me, it doesn't suggest any kind of radical or reactionary kind of approach things at all. Like, of any kind of views. It's, you just see what I mean? It seems to me like a very inclusive, but yet very moderate, very I can't find it, but anyway, very moderate kind of middle way approach to basically conducting yourself within society. And the first I liked that he emphasized right off the bat, in your heart follow the Dharma law, in all other affairs the law of the land, and all other things. So, again, it suggests to me not necessarily a conformity, but more of a there's a assimilation there. You should really try to be part of whatever place, time, and culture you're in. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, it's a very well, what's interesting is if Rennyo had wanted to say follow the 10 good deeds, or obey the precepts, or follow the Buddhist morality that was taught by Shakyamuni, he could have said that. He had all the words, he had all the if he had wanted to say that, he could have written that, right?
Exactly.
No problem.
Exactly. That would have been very clear cut. And it would have been very simple. That'd be very, if that's what was intended, or if that's what was, we're meant to do, then that would have been very simply and, well spelled out by Shinran and Rennyo. But I don't see where that's been done by them. But anyway, sorry, we'll keep continue.
Yeah, well, I wanted to say that because what the phrase Rennyo actually uses here is the principles of humanity and justice or righteousness, it's sometimes translated. And this is a Confucian term. So we get to talk about Confucianism, by the way.
Can I ask you a quick question? Can you
please?
Are you going from a link there? Is you going from a web page that you have up?
Yeah.
Can you put that in the chat?
Sure. It'll take me a bit, but let me copy it and send it over.
Yeah, copy the yeah. But
do you want the letter as well, or just what I'm about to share?
Both. Can you pop both in the chat for me, please?
Yeah. I will. I'll give here really quick. This will take.
Because if I can bring up the letter, I can share it, and then and the next.
The only thing is
as well. But
this is a link to a very long page.
Okay.
So you may want to search.
Well, that's where I was trying to find it. Yeah, that's where I was on.
Humanity.
That's the one I was on. So it's number. The number
26, but it's probably easier if you try to search for humanity on that page.
On that page. Okay, gotcha.
And then it's probably the first reference that'll pop up.
But it's in that same letter, right?
Yeah.
So norms of conduct. Norms of conduct. That's where we are. Yes.
Yeah, let's put it up on the screen so that
I'm going to. Yes, definitely.
We can see what we're
discussing. I lost again. Bear with me a sec. Go back up. And was this was the one that you just read, right? Is this?
If it's the one from fascically to letter 6, it should have a 6 on there somewhere.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. And all right, bear with a sec. I'm just going to.
I must confess, I'm kind of a noob when it comes to Zoom, so I don't know where.
Well, and I think you're limited. Possibly limited if you're not on a computer. You're more limited.
Oh, okay. Which, by the way, I did buy a new gaming laptop recently.
Ah, nice.
I'm going to be setting it up. I haven't set up all the Zoom and everything, but maybe from our next session it'll be ready to go.
Yeah. That would be great. There we go. Can you see? Do you see?
Yes, there it is on norms of conduct. Yeah.
Norms of conduct. Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah.
So shall we just read that again? Can we?
Sure. Should I read the whole? It's kind of short, so maybe
I should
read the whole.
Or I could read it. Or since you've already read it, I'll read it.
Oh, go ahead. Okay. Yeah.
Please do. So 6 on norms of conduct. If there are any of you who have heard the meaning of our traditions, other power faith, and become decisively settled, you must store the truth of that faith in the bottom of your hearts. Do not talk about it with those of other sects or others not of our tradition. Furthermore, you must not praise it openly in the presence of such people on byways and main roads and in the villages where you live. Next, do not slight the provincial military governors and local land stewards, claiming that you have attained faith. Meet your public obligations in full without fail. Further, do not belittle the various kami and Buddhas and bodhisattvas, for they are all encompassed within the 6 characters Namu Amida Butsu. Besides this, in particular, take the laws of the state as your outer aspect. Store the other power faith deep in your hearts, and take the principles of humanity and justice as essential. Bear in mind that these are the rules of conduct that have been established within our tradition. Respectfully, written on the 17th day of the 2nd month of Bun May 6, 1474.
Yeah. So couple interesting notes from a historical point of view on this text. First of all, it's not necessarily immediately apparent, but Rennyo is actually addressing a historical situation in this letter, which was that there was a Nimbutsu followers who were kind of going gung-ho, so to speak.
Yes.
And they were rebelling against the provincial military governors and local land stewards.
Is this the
it was called the
Okoiki?
Yeah.
Wait, what is it?
Ikoiki.
Ikoiki, yeah. Ikoiki, yes, I am familiar. Yeah.
The Ikoiki. If you know a little bit about Japanese history in the Warring States, the Sengoku period, then you probably have heard of the Ikoiki.
Oh, yes.
But yeah, they were Nimbutsu followers. They, in some cases, got very, unruly,
militant,
and violent, and
one
militant.
Might say. In this,
there's a famous, There's a famous banner that they would carry into battle in some cases that said, to go forward is to be born in the Pure Land, and to fall, to be a coward is to go to the endless hell. Kind of a very black and white, and somewhat
misguided. Yeah, and it's this there's very similar sects that exist today that have a similar sentiment. Calling people cowards, and for not
towing the line,
or proclaiming certain things, or having or for not having extreme political views or of one type or another. I won't get into specifics.
We've been there. We've all been there.
Anyways,
So of course, Rennyo here is saying, don't do that. So stop, first of all, and he really focuses on this. Take the principles of humanity and justice as essential. Now, the second historical note here is that many centuries later, these references in Gobunsho, especially where he says to follow the law of the state. Most recently, of course, during World War II, these texts were pointed to basically tell Jodo Shinshu followers in Japan that you need to do whatever the imperial Japanese government tells you, and just fall in line. So
it can be abused in other ways as well.
So they can be abused in other ways, although it's ironic. What Rennyo is saying here was actually to stop wrong widespread chaos and wrongdoing, but then centuries later they were misapplied to a completely different situation. So those are
a much later point in Mappo.
A much later, age in Mappo. Now, what I really wanted to get into here is what exactly are the principles of humanity and justice? And in order to do that, we have to kind of go into the Japanese a bit. Let me bring this up.
Are you you're going to bring up another website?
Yeah, let me. Unfortunately, this is only. Okay, you know what? I won't share the Japanese because it's not going to be of much use. Let me share the English.
But you can you can say the Japanese, and then if you have if you have an English website, definitely.
Let me go ahead and share this one because this is I do want to bring this into the conversation. How do I share again? Oh wait, that's not it. Where's the chat? It disappeared. Okay, here we go. Um, yeah, and this is just
Okay,
a
excellent.
random. This is from the Institute for East and West. What is it? The East. Creating Research Institute for Creating New Paradigms Based on Eastern and Western Wisdom. And it's a Japanese website. So,
Excellent.
yeah,
There you go.
I don't, yeah, it's not an endorsement. I don't know what's
No,
on
no,
this website. I'm just saying.
anything we share from whatever websites we're sharing, we are not
Yeah,
affiliated with any of these organizations, nor are endorsing them, nor are benefiting by them, nor are,
right, right.
we
Exactly.
are just using
Disclaimer.
these for educational purposes. There
Exactly.
we go.
And so, but this is a very good summary of Confucianism and Confucian thought. And it's interesting if you look at the first paragraph there, he's giving the background of Confucius. I don't think Confucius needs any introduction. Most people have heard, at least heard
Yeah.
of Confucius. But he was, in fact, a real person. And he lived during what's sometimes called the axial age. So, kind of a time when really around the world there was a lot of thinkers, philosophers, spiritual thinkers were kind of coming up with a lot of ideas independently. But you had the Buddha and the founder of the Jain religion in India. You had, Aristotle and Socrates in ancient Greece, the beginnings of Greek philosophy. And then in China, you had Confucius and Taoism, Lao Tzu, right?
Yep.
And I don't know Chinese, so my pronunciations are.
Shuangzi, right? How late when did
Oh yeah,
Shuangzi?
Shuangzi was I don't know when he was, but probably same era.
Was it similar area or was it later? I can't
It
remember.
may have been later. I
Yeah.
don't know. But basically what happened is you had the in ancient China, you had the Zhou dynasty, which was a very great, stable, kingdom, right? And then eventually it sort of lost power and fell apart, and you entered the Warring States era. And so thinkers like Confucius were living in a period of turmoil and violence, and they were looking for principles that could lead to how do we fix this mess, right? How do we live? So the basic questions of how to live as a human being in the world and with each other are very much addressed in Confucius's thought. And interesting, well, not interesting, a personal note, the Analects, the Confucius, the book, the work that is the oral record of Confucius's teaching, used to be my favorite spiritual or religious philosophical text before I encountered Jodo Shinshu. I used to read through the Analects quite a number of times. I actually read a few different translations.
Wow.
It is a great book. It's definitely worth reading. If you haven't read it, it's very interesting. You'll find all kinds of just interesting stuff in there. It's a lot of
any study I've done of Confucius was sort of through the Taoist lens.
Okay.
I studied more Taoist texts and Taoist writings about Taoism, and that came in, and so that the what's the word, that interplay between Taoism and that sort of yin yang battle between the two types of Taoism. You know what I mean? That's where I learned. I'd never actually read I've read different parts of the Analects and different but never actually read the anyway. So
yeah, it's certainly an interesting text. I haven't read it in a while, but it's Confucian thought is where what Rennyo is talking about comes from. So to know what Rennyo is saying here, we kind of have to look at what is this thought. And what he's saying is Jin and Gi. And Jin is humanity, and Gi is righteousness or justice. And if you scroll down on this page, there's a lot of content here, but we don't have to read it all.
No.
I believe towards the bottom of the page, it mentions, here we go. In this way, Confucianism showed us the most important factors to create a peaceful society, a society where people are not killing each other, propriety and benevolence, with the addition of Yi, righteousness, Ji, wisdom, and Xin, trustworthiness. With these last three elements, the list became the 5 cardinal virtues of Confucianism. Maybe go up a paragraph. I think it actually did discuss benevolence. Okay, here we go. Yeah. So this is Rin, or in Japanese, Ji. So this is humanity or benevolence.
Should we just read these 2 paragraphs all and then?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Confucius believed that another thing, Rin, or benevolence, was also needed to maintain a peaceful society. What is this benevolence? It means consideration of others, sympathy, and compassion. If people have consideration of others when they interact, human relations will be shaped without resistance and opposition, arguments and conflicts, hatred and malice. It is necessary to move away from the roots of the disorder of people killing each other. For that, he believed that it is important to educate people to treat benevolence as something precious. So this is the first thing that Rennyo is talking about, benevolence. And you notice this is kind of, there aren't a bunch of rules here. This is
again, meanings, principles, and meanings of words. Again, with the Chinese also, Chinese words also have that array of meaning to each word. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that paragraph is pretty self-explanatory, not much to add there. So if you scroll down, I think there's a link to another.
I'll just point out it's very different approach than certain, things you might hear from more extreme groups of so-called Jodo Shinshu followers. This is a very different approach than what you might hear.
Well, this benevolence and the cultivation thereof requires more than just this is about human relations on an individual level and forming actual connections with people, right? And then treating people. And really, Rin, the principle of humanity, when Confucius was asked, what is this all about? He answered in a very similar way to the Buddha previously, and then many centuries later, Jesus would answer similarly and say, well, it's about doing to others what you would want them to do to you, or not doing to others what you would not want them to do to you. And so this is actually one of the first formulations of the golden rule, right? But this is not, getting on the internet and, posting things. This is like making, this is an individual connections between people, whether in families or society. And of course, the internet now is part of that. But I do find sometimes that the internet tends to divert us from beneficial communication.
No. Oh, exactly. And what I'm seeing here is we're looking for, this principle of Ren is about peace, consideration, sympathy, compassion. It's not, respect. It's not it's not divisive. It's not trying to be divisive. It's not trying, we're not, what I mean? It's to avoid those things.
It's not
exactly. I was
judging
going to say that.
others.
Yeah, I was going to say that. No, not
No.
judging others. It's very different than that. It's
Mm.
avoiding all that actually.
Yeah, because
Avoid them.
Confucian thought is based on the idea that one has to first address one's own problems, and then it's like
Yep.
a ripple effect. It
Yep.
spreads out to widening, circles, areas of
Of
society.
influence. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's that finger pointing at, where's the finger pointing? It's pointing at backward at us.
It's at me.
It's not you, and this is not right, and that's not right, and you're not right. It's
Yeah.
I'm not right.
Yeah.
So how do I get right? What do I do? And it also makes me think. So if you start here, it comes out. There's there's other teachings in Buddhism that talk about that. One of which Lotus Sutra teachings about the idea of the 3,000 realms in a single thought moment. Where everything that the primary world that you're in, as a human, but also primary other, if you're a god, if you're a deva, like that's going to emanate into everything. That's going to emanate into people's lives. That's going to emanate into the land, into the society, into your life, into your relationship.
Right.
If you're ghostly and you're addicted, if that's your primary thing, that's going to have consequences throughout and be very destructive, and you know what I mean, and harm others, bring others into your addiction, and or what have you. You can, there's many ways you can go with that, but yeah, it's that it starts here.
Exactly.
Fingers go here and then out.
Yeah.
Then just by virtue of you doing that. Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
And of course, we are Bombu, not bodhisattvas, so we can't act with perfect sympathy and compassion 24/7 like Dharmakara did. But that doesn't mean that that we're off the hook for being human beings in the world. It's very important. So
again, these are principles. It's principles again.
It's
guidelines.
It's not.
We're not.
More
and
like
that's the balance
guidelines.
with this. Balance is always going, yes, I need to look at me, but at the same time being realistic about my karmic limitations and my limitations for behaving in certain ways, and all of our limitations in Mappo for behaving in certain ways in this age of these defilements and how intense those defilements are now, it's so on and so forth. But these are the kind of the principles and guidelines which we should try to uphold as best we can and incorporate in our lives as best we can. Yeah.
Right. And not just as, Nimbutsu followers or followers of Jodo Shinshu, or even as followers of, a religious tradition or teaching, but simply as human beings. Right? Yeah. This is the baseline starting point for what separates us from animals, right?
Exactly. Should be the common denominator. This should be the common denominator, leveler,
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
So great insight. Right. So if you scroll down here, I hope there's a link at the bottom. If not, I'll send it. Let's see.
What are you looking for? Did you want to read this next paragraph as well? Should we read this next paragraph again and then discuss that?
Okay, sure. Yeah.
Because that kind of follows.
Yeah, it does tie in.
Yeah.
Okay, so
shall I read? You want me to read? Or shall I read this time?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. In this way, Confucianism showed us the most important factors to create a peaceful society, a society where people are not killing each other, propriety and benevolence, with the addition of yi, righteousness, ji, wisdom, and zin, trustworthiness. With those last three elements, the list became the five cardinal virtues of Confucianism: Ren, humanity, benevolence; Yi, righteousness; Li, propriety, rights; Ji, wisdom, knowledge; and Zin, trustworthiness.
Thank you. Yeah. So, and the two that Rennyo is specifically, mentioning in his letter are the Rin, the humanity, benevolence, and the Yi, the righteousness, right? And these are kind of emblematic of Confucian, moral or ethical teaching as a whole. Okay, so now I have to share the next
Okay.
page. So give me a moment here. Okay. Yeah, okay.
You want to send me that link again as well?
Yeah, I'm going to send it right now. Let me get into the chat here. It's a kind of a sequel, a continuation of the last article. So,
all right.
Let me know if you got it there.
Yeah, I've got it. Just bear with a moment while I share the screen again.
While you're bringing that up, I thought I'd say it is interesting to note that in Kyogyo Shincho, Shinran quotes a Chinese Buddhist author who basically identified Confucius and Lao Tzu as well as both being sort of bodhisattvas or Buddhas in disguise, giving a kind of preparatory teachings to the Chinese, people in order to kind of, awaken them more ethically and spiritually and sort of bring them to, Buddhism, which would come later, right?
Yeah, and that makes such sense. It's kind of, like I mentioned that in another video, one of our discussions. It's kind of thinly veiled, these, I think both Lao Tzu and Confucius were kind of thinly veiled bodhisattvas. It's kind of obvious that they were extraordinary beings that either Buddhas or bodhisattvas in some form. But anyway,
yeah. And of course, as Buddhists, we aren't required to study Confucius or Lao Tzu or that philosophy, but it is important in the case where, especially understanding what Rennyo is talking about in this letter, we have to kind of look at the history of that, thought. So we don't necessarily need to read the entire thing here, but I do want to see where it talks about. So it says in the previous article, we looked at Li and Rin. Okay, here we go. Yi. Yi could be translated as righteousness. It means being in accordance with a rational path and moral principles. It means following natural laws and conducting oneself correctly. And then basically, so what is the correct way to conduct oneself? This refers to human norms. You can go just so far, not further, and should stop there. It relates to standards of behavior and a sense of discretion shared among people, and so on and so forth. And if we go down a bit, okay, yeah, so that's basically the end. So that's what Yi or righteousness, rightness, not propriety, but justice, the principle of justice means in a Confucian context. So one thing to note here is kind of like, well, I always think of what Captain Barbossa says in Pirates of the Caribbean. It's a bit like the Pirates Code in that it's more like guidelines than actual rules.
Exactly.
And even if you read the Analects, it's a very, generous and flexible text. It's, Confucianism later became this very rigid, as all things do, it fossilized into this, you know, endless legalistic list of, you know, behavioral regulations. But Confucius,
it still had that.
you
It
know,
originally had the flexibility of the Tao, had the flexibility of Taoism. You know, of a Tao. It wasn't Taoism, but it was, in a sense, it was a form of Taoism. It was a form of, you know, it had the flexibility, had that behind that principle, the Tao principle, the Tao kind of behind it. So that, anyway.
Yeah. And so I think it's important. So it kind of became more like rules than, it became more like actual rules than guidelines.
Yes, exactly. As humans are wont to do, especially in Mappo.
And the same thing has happened with Buddhism, right? I mean, if you look at the Buddhist teaching in the sutras versus what, you know, was later compiled in the endless and ongoing, you know, Abhidharmic texts or other related, you know, texts. I mean, sometimes the difference is quite, you know, not insignificant, you know, let's say. And of course, in all times and ages, Buddhists are always trying to best understand the words of the Buddha in accordance with their time and their age, right? And we, of course, have to do the same today. But, you know, again, what is Rennyo saying in this letter? He's saying,
well, I want to stay on that.
Yeah.
No, it's you know, I want to, you know, having said how, you know, things become codified and become rules. I think in Buddhism, the spirit or the purpose of that, it was both practical and also trying to elucidate and bring out the teachings. And there was a practical level to it for teaching, you know, all the categorizing, the excellent way that Buddhist teachings were categorized, and, you know, and then everything numbered, and kind of, you know, there's a very practical, very excellent, very logical way that was done. So I just want to, you know, while at the same time, that, you know, that things kind of could look like they become rules and codified, what the original purpose of those things, you know, is still there, and it was for teaching, it was for passing on the teaching in a way that people could understand it, and in a kind of logical progression, or do you know what I mean? And so there was always the idea of that was always for better understanding, for teaching, for being able to pass it on, for being able to transmit it in more skillful ways.
Yeah, and the Abhidharma, of course, is one of the great achievements textually of Buddha's thought. And of course, you know, Vasubandhu, before he converted to Mahayana, was a Sarvastivadin monk and wrote the Abhidharma Kosha, which is like in East Asia, it's the authoritative text of the Abhidharma, which contains psychology, ethics, you know, the science of the time, philosophy. You know, there's all kinds of, it's voluminous. It's a huge text. But in terms of application, I don't think it can be said that it's equally applicable in every age. In fact,
no.
From a Jodo Shinshu point of view, we have to kind of look at those texts as provisional, and then recognize that for us, you know, Jodo Shinshu, obviously, the three Purelian Sutras are the you know, the sort of the sufficient teaching for our age, for us specifically, right?
For us specifically, for us Bombu, for us ordinary, the evil person, and in this age as well, that does come into it. Anyway.
And if you think about it, the larger sutra. So now I want to. Okay, so now we've looked at what Rennyo says: principles of humanity, benevolence, principles of justice, righteousness. Again, principles, right? Not, if Rennyo had wanted to give a list of, moral precepts to be obeyed, he, like the Ten Commandments, he could have easily have done that, but instead he pointed us to these principles, right, and said that it's important for us as Nimbutsu followers and as human beings to what does he say? Protect or follow these principles of humanity and righteousness. And where Rennyo does give, more specific rules, it's more dealing with like behavior of Nimbutsu followers. So like, don't slight Shinto shrines. Don't slight other Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. That kind of thing. Very sort of practical advice. And a lot of which, I think is, of course, still very much applicable to us today, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So, yeah, if we're looking for, how do we live as Nimbutsu followers, this is it. it's right here.
In one paragraph.
Yeah, in a very short, pithy letter. Now, I want to tie this in because in the larger sutra, the second half of the larger sutra, Shakyamuni does go into a very lengthy discussion of kind of what's wrong with the world and then what people should do. So it's actually, similar to the problem that Confucius was looking at. He was looking around and seeing what's wrong with the world. People are killing each other. This should never be the case. And then what do we do to fix that? Well, Shakyamuni, from his enlightened perspective as the Buddha, the awakened one, gives the definitive version, so to speak, on this question. And when I was first starting to read the larger sutra, I was always kind of I always thought the second half was very interesting and attractive, in that it's a extensive sort of summary of everything that is wrong with samsara because of greed, ignorance, and aversion, right? And then also how to fix those problems. And so I want to try to find the passage in the larger sutra here, so we can sort of wrap up.
I was going to ask if you could, if you could send me a link.
I have to scroll through and hopefully find it, but it's in the second half for sure. And the Buddha is basically, he's discussing the 5 evils in the world. Okay.
What's wrong with the world?
Yes.
There's something wrong.
Exactly. And it's a very extensive.
You feel it all around you. You feel it when you go to church, when you pay your tax.
To continue exactly. Now that is the Matrix, right?
Yeah, that's Matrix. Yeah, that's most assuredly the Matrix. I didn't get it exactly right, but that's where I was heading.
I recognize that one. Where is it? Oh no. Okay. Boy, this is quite lengthy. I did want to just bring a
Bring out.
particular passage out.
Okay.
Oh man, this may be too long
Too
for me
long?
to find this particular passage.
I see what you mean. Yeah. Oh, and you can't
Hold on.
search in a way. Is there a keyword I can? I'll do a search for it. So you're in the larger sutra.
Yeah, I'm in the larger sutra. I'm in the second half, and I'm particularly looking for this very good passage.
Let me. And what should I? What's the keyword I should look for? Or the,
Man, I feel like I'm right on the verge of finding it here.
It's in part two. You said, yeah.
Yeah, it's where the Buddha is basically describing the five evils, and then
Okay. One sec.
he's also giving the sort of the what people should be doing instead of doing the five evils.
Five great offenses,
really beautiful.
But excluded on. Then okay, is it expected are those or accepted are those who seek birth in the worlds of other quarters during the turbulent period of the five defilements? No. Just keep going.
Yeah, it might be a little bit farther.
Okay.
Oh, here it is. I found it.
What's it start with? So I can,
maybe.
You found it. Can you send me the link for?
Unfortunately, it's a PDF file, so I can't really
That's all right.
bookmark.
Yeah. So what's the phrase? What's the first phrase? And I'll bring it up.
If you are using the Inagaki translation.
Oh, I'm just on. Yeah. Okay. Inagaki translation. 1 sec. Let me.
Yeah. You know what though? I wonder if this is actually passage. Oh, okay. Maybe I found it.
Oh, sorry, folks.
This is a lot more difficult
to find. Yeah. No, I'm just on the. Hello. I don't know if you're there. Can you?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
I am here. I am.
I can just go from. I'll just go from what what I can kind of find here on the.
Okay, I found it. Okay, so if you search for.
Yes.
Try. Okay.
Largest suit for miserable life.
Revere the sages would be one possibility.
Right. Bear with me a moment. Let me just get back to the one. Revere the sages, yeah? You say?
Yeah.
Revere.
And it is probably in that. I think this paragraph is the one that I am thinking of. So, yeah.
Oh, wait. The path of the Buddha. Revere the path. There we go. Yes. I found it. Good.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
1 sec. Bear with me. I'll just share my screen and then I'll share my screen and we'll gain strength from the sharing.
Okay. Took us a bit.
That's a very different movie reference that probably has nothing to do with Buddhism at all.
Yeah. Okay. This is it.
Yes.
Yeah. So
hold on. Let me just let me enlarge this. Bear with me a sec. Hold on. You find it again. There. Okay. Right. Yeah. Can you see it? You see it okay?
I can't. So I'll go ahead and read this. This is from the larger sutra. So the Buddha continued, you and other devas and humans of the present and people of future generations, having received the Buddha's teachings, should reflect upon them and, while following them, should remain upright in thought and do virtuous deeds. Rulers should abide by morality, reign with beneficence, and decree that everyone should maintain proper conduct, revere the sages, respect men of virtue, be benevolent and kind to others. So again, we have benevolence here.
Yep.
And take care not to disregard the Buddha's teachings and admonitions. All should seek emancipation, cut the roots of samsara and its various evils, and so aspire to escape from the paths of immeasurable sorrow, fear, and pain in the three evil realms. So this is, again, kind of pointing to, but there is another passage. I'll go ahead and see if I can find the supplementary passage here.
Is it within the larger sutra as well?
It is. Yeah.
Okay.
Hold on. Okay.
What's the general subject?
Yeah, I think it has to do with. Try family. Let's see what happens.
Family.
I found it. Yes, finally. Okay.
This one went right to a.
Yeah, family members. Is that what?
Yeah, this one right to it. It went right to it. It went right.
This is actually the one that I wanted to find.
Okay.
The other passage was good as well.
Let me scroll up a bit to get to the. So there.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the beginning of that. Passage.
Yeah. So we don't have to read the whole thing, but he's talking about just the, what happens when people, are greedy and want things they don't have, and so on and so forth, and are, exhausted in mind and body. They become restless in all their doings, and anxieties follow on their heels. So it's a very thorough,
indeed,
a very thorough
and accurate depiction
and accurate diagnosis.
Yes.
I love this part.
Definitely.
If they possess some of them, others may be lacking. If they have this, they do not have that, and so they wish to possess all. But even if by some chance they come to possess everything, it will soon be destroyed or lost. So, yeah. So later, same passage.
And they're done that.
Yeah. Although, people of the world, parents and children, brothers and sisters, husbands and wives, and other family members and kinsmen should respect and love each other, refraining from hatred and envy. They should share things with others and not be greedy and miserly, always speak friendly words with a pleasing smile, and not hurt each other. I think, it's all there, pretty much. You ask what we should be doing. You can't get better than that. The part that we could potentially try to do is that. And it ties right into the Rennyo. It definitely fits or is indicated. So it goes without saying that because we don't, there isn't, an end has not been made of our blind passions. So we are going to have anger and envy and all of these things clouding the sky of Shinjin, right? And welling up. But, in terms of not taking a liking to the poison, right? This is a very good phrase or sentence, couple of sentences here in the larger sutra that I think doesn't even need any commentary. It's so clear and straightforward.
No, exactly. And right from the sutra. I mean, this is
from the sutra, yes.
Should respect and love each other, refraining from hatred and envy. They should share things with others and not be greedy, miserly, always speak friendly words with a pleasing smile and not hurt each other.
There you have it.
You can't get more straightforward than that and simplified than that. I mean, even in the sutra, it's simple. It's very simplify for us, among other teachings. But
yeah. Well, that's the great thing about the sutras is they're so direct and, just it's the Buddha didn't, like it says, every word spoken by the Buddha is well spoken. Everything is perfectly in order.
exactly.
Some other books, and philosophers and so on, you have to read like volumes and volumes just for them to get around to saying, whatever it is they want to say.
Yep.
And the words of the Buddha, coming from enlightenment, the realm of nirvana.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
Yeah.
They've got the Buddha mind. They've got the, they know exactly how we need to hear it in all times and all places.
Absolutely.
And who's going to hear it in all times and all places, all at once.
Right.
So, yeah. Anyway.
So I think maybe I guess time is up.
Yes.
But
yeah.
I think this is has been a good discussion of,
agreed.
At least some of the principles of, how we should be living or attempting to live as Nimbutsu followers. And we certainly can go further to discussions of more concrete, politics and other Buddhist teachings and what is the relation there. But for today, I think this has been a good kind of general overview.
I think so too. Yeah, it's been great. And I like, that we've brought it right. We've ended it with the larger sutra, what the larger sutra has to say itself, just kind of reinforcing everything that was kind of discussed. So you can't get more authoritative than the larger sutra itself.
Right.
You get more authentic. For Jodo Shinshu, you can't get more authoritative and authentic than the larger sutra itself. So, well, fantastic. Thank you so much. And thanks so much for your preparations and again, sharing your knowledge and experience and
of which there is all too little.
Yes. Likewise. Yes. Likewise.
No, it's my pleasure. It was a good discussion. I actually was interested in knowing the meanings of the terms that Rennyo used, so that's what led me to discuss or to research the original, Confucian thought behind underlying those terms. So
I think it's a kind of a tradition, started by Shinran of Jodo Shinshu is, looking into all the multiple meanings of the words. I think, if Shinran did that, it's kind of an indication of, things we should be doing.
To set the stage and make sure we have our bearings right. We're not discussing something completely different than what is intended, right?
Exactly, and not just our one, not just from our one blinded angle. It's as bringing as much nuance and meaning and depth and breadth that we can of those things. So, thank you.
Taking the broad view, right?
The broad view and study broadly. That's kind of the that part of the Shakyamuni's teaching coming in there. Study broadly, to prove these things. So, but anyway,
great. So next week, I should be available on Sunday. Actually, I'm going to. I'll be attending Kobai Sensei's lecture on Saturday. So if you do have questions for Kobai Sensei, feel free to send them to me via messenger.
I definitely will.
Otherwise, we can meet again on the next Sunday.
Yeah.
And
Fantastic.
then after that, I will be actually going back to America for a couple weeks. So we might have to take a break during the middle of September and then come back
absolutely
toward the end of September. So,
that's absolutely fine. That
all
will
right.
be
Sounds
great.
good.
Thank you again so much, and until next time.
Thank you. My pleasure. I do enjoy our discussions every time. It's a great
Likewise.
discussion.
All right, take care. Namo
All
Amida
right.
Butsu.
Namo Amida Butsu. Take care.
All right, all the best.
You too.